Thank you for hanging in there with us. We appreciate it. We've talked about it, that it's the beauty of live production. And we've often said at our events that technology is great until it's not. But I think we're back on. Apologize to everyone. Glad Austin got everything hooked back up there. We're in the middle of 1A. I'll continue 1A here. We talked about Sweetwater. They're at number 10 with a record of 13-12. Addison went 4-0 last week. They come in at 18-8. They're at number 9. Are we good? Okay, I thought I heard. Okay, I'm sorry. At number 8 is Brantley. Brantley jumps up a spot from 9 to 8. They went 3-0 last week. They sit at 11-2. Billingsley, they stay put at number 7. They went 3-1 last week. They currently sit at 15-7. Fayetteville, they drop a spot this week. They went 2-1 last week. Had a good week, nothing against them, but they did drop one spot. Fayetteville comes in at number 6 with a 16-8 record. At number 5, Florala jumps up one spot. They go from 6 to 5 this week. They went a perfect 2-0 last week. They sit at 12-6. Leroy stays at number 4 with a record of 19-4 after going 2-0 last week. Milry, they stay put at number 3. Milry went 2-0 last week. They're at 20.
I think the 0-2.
I'm sorry. I said, I'm sorry, 0-2. But we looked up those losses, and I forget who they're to, but there's a reason.
Leroy, they beat Leroy in area.
That's correct. Yeah, they beat Leroy in area. So, again, we've talked about this. Now that we're in the area, those 2 out of 3 games are carrying the most weight. And as we mentioned before, if a team wins the first 2 and they lose that game 3 that doesn't mean anything, we're not going to punish them for that. And you're going to see that happen at some points during the 7A classification polls that we'll be putting out. Appalachian, they stay put at number 2. They are 19-2. They went 4-0 last week. And Hackleburg, they come in with a record of 20-5. They went 3-1 last week. And I think it might have been to Mars Hill. I may be wrong there. But Hackleburg had a quality loss. I forget who it was to. But they stay put at number 1 this week. Some of those teams sitting right outside the top 10 in 1A, you have Athens Bible. And these are, let's make sure we understand, these are in alphabetical order, okay? This is not in any order outside the top 10. Athens Bible is at 13-4. Coosa Christian is at 10-9. Hubbardville is at 12-4. Ider is at 15-7. Lynn is at 16-7. Spring Garden is 12-7. University Charters 12-7, and Victory Christian comes in with a 9-7-1 record.
I'll go ahead and get us rolling in Class 2A. I don't know if you mentioned it or not, but I don't think we have a new number 1 this week in 1A.
There's not much movement really through 7 classifications.
Yep. So we'll go ahead and get started in Class 2A. We've got one new team this week. And they come in at number 10, but they've been inside the top 10 in Class 2A. They exited a couple weeks ago and make their way back in this week, and that's St. Luke's Episcopal. St. Luke's sits at 15-8. After a strong week last week, they went 2-1, pushing their record to 15-8. Pike Liberal Arts stays put at number 9 this week. They went 1-1 this past week and sit at 12-13 with their record, moving up 2 spots after making their debut last week. That's Cottonwood. Cottonwood continues to reel off the strong season, and then they've got a pretty strong winning streak going on. They went 2-0 this past week and pushed their record to 17-4. Red Bay also goes undefeated on the week and slides up 1 spot from 8 to 7. Red Bay, who's coming off I think it was a Final Four run last year. I know it was at least the Elite Eight. I think they made it to the Final Four, coming off last year's deep playoff run, and we talked about how. That last year they were pretty young in some spots, and this year have seemed to continue to build off that momentum from last year and look to be playing their best baseball and look ready for another deep playoff run. Red Bay comes in at number 7. They're 15-6. And then at number 6, staying put this week is Mars Hill Bible. Mars Hill went 2-1 this past week, pushing their record to 15-9. This is our only movement inside the top 5 this week. GW Long and Summerton Christian swap spots. GW Long slides down from 4 to 5. They sit at 15-8, and then Summerton Christian jumps them. They went 3-0 on the week, pushing the record to 17-6.
I think they've won about 8 or 11 in a row, something like that, man. They won a lot.
Yep, we knew they were going to be good, moving up from 1A this year, and they look ready to defend their 1A state championship and 2A this year. At number 3, staying put, going 4-0 on the week is Decatur Heritage, who sits at 19-3. Ayrton stays put at number 2. They went 1-1 and sit at 20-6, and then staying at the top spot after a 2-0 week is Vincent. The Yellow Jackets sit at 19-5. So that'll do it for the top 10 in Class 2A. Looking at some teams just outside the top 10 in Class 2A, starting it off. You've got Bayshore Christian, who comes in with the record of 11-12. Bell Green is 9-10. Cedar Bluff is 18-8. JU Blackshear is 13-9. Lindsay Lane Christian is 15-12. And I think Lindsay Lane and Decatur Heritage have an area series coming up this week, so that'll be a good one to follow. North Sand Mountain was our one team who fell out of the rankings this past week. They sit at 18-6 now. Pleasant Valley is 14-10. Reeltown is 13-9, and then rounding it out in alphabetical order, Susan Moore sits at 10-12.
And that'll get us going to Class 3A, where we've got one new team this week, and they do jump back in at number 10. That's Whitesburg Christian. I'm almost certain they have already clinched their area championship. I think Randolph won the runner-up spot in that area. Whitesburg Christian, I think they went 3-1 last week. Had a loss on Saturday after an area series sweep last week. They come in at 15-10. Gordo jumps up from 10 to 11. The Green Wave won a perfect 4-0 last week. They sit at 16-11. I may be wrong, but I think they play Oakman this week in area play to wrap it up. I think that's right. Number 8, Thorsby. They stay put from last week. They went 3-1 last week. They sit at 23-7. Dropping a couple spots is Lee Scott Academy. Lee Scott Academy went 1-2 last week. But we didn't want to punish them a lot because, number one, we think they're really good and they've been playing very well of late. They did lose an area series. They lost the first 2 games to number 2 Glenwood. And both of those were, I know at least one of them was a pretty competitive game. So, losing 2 games to Glenwood, there was not you didn't want to punish them too much. That is the number 2 team here in 3A. So Lee Scott slides down to number 7 at 17-9. Collinsville seems to be playing really well right now. They went 3-0 last week, and they sit at 16-6. They thumped somebody this past week. I forget who it was, but Collinsville seems to be playing really well right now, as does Winfield. Winfield, we got them in a couple weeks ago at like number 10. They've continued to ascend up the rankings. They were 6 last week. They're they're number 5 this week after going 3-0 last week and sitting at 22-6. The top 4 remain the same. St. James stays put at number 4. They went 3-0 last week. They sit at 16-6. Thomasville, the defending state champs, they went a perfect 3-0 last week. They sit at 16-6. Glenwood went they are 21-4, but they only lost 1 game last week. And again, as I mentioned previously in 1A, they beat Lee Scott the first 2 games, and then Lee Scott was able to win that 3rd game. That 3rd game does not mean anything. We're not going to punish Glenwood. They won the 2 games that count. They sit at 21-4. And Prattville Christian, they come in at 24-2 and hold on to the top spot. So really impressive group of teams there in 3A.
I think Prattville Christian's 1 loss 2 was against, I think, Montgomery Academy, where they won the first 2 games and lost the game 3 like Glenwood.
Yep, you are correct. I remember that now. That's right. So again, don't want to sound like a broken record, but we're not punishing teams for that game 3 loss if they sweep. Outside the top 10, let's look at those teams alphabetical. You have Altamont at 12-4, a team that we've heard that Altamont is a really good team. They're going to be a tough out in 3A. Fife is at 14-6. JB Pennington is at 13-12. They went 1-1 last week. Lauderdale County, a team that maybe scuffled a little bit early in the season. Lauderdale County also is notorious for getting hot when it counts and playing good in the playoffs, and it looks like that's what's going on now. They went 3-0 last week. They sit at 14-10. Montgomery Academy is at 12-7. We just mentioned them. Oakman, we talked about their series upcoming with Gordo this week. Oakman comes in at 15-14. Phil Campbell is another team that has been hot of late. I know they went 3-0 last week. They sit at 16-10. Piedmont is at 12-11. And Piedmont, that schedule may be a little misleading because they played a lot of really good teams. Providence Christian is at 10-9. I think they went 2-0 last week. T.R. Miller, they went 1-1 last week. They sit at 11-9. Vinemont is at 21-7. They went undefeated last week. And rounding us out is Wicksburg. Wicksburg went undefeated at 2-0 last week and currently sit at 10-8.
Moving into Class 4A this week, we've got the same 10 teams this week. Looking at the top 10, we'll start off at number 10 this week, and that's Westbrook Christian. Westbrook Christian, who's been at the top spot for a good part of the season. They lost to Hoax Bluff this past week in area, and then who was the other team they lost to previously in area? Etowah. So they've got some work to do in their area. Not sure how the area. I know you've tried to look at it, take a stab at it, because I think it's a 5-team area, correct?
It is. You got Aniana, Hoax Bluff, Etowah, Asheville, and I'm leaving somebody out. Somebody obvious. Sorry, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's a 5-team area. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you just said 4, and then Westbrook Christian.
Yeah, and Westbrook Christian makes the 5th. That's correct. Yes.
So Westbrook Christian, not sure how their area's. Not sure. I think they're 1-3 in area right now, so they've got some work to do in area. So we'll see how it goes this week. But they stay inside the top 10 this week at number 10, sliding down 5 spots. They sit at 18-6. Trinity Presbyterian jumps up 1 spot after going 4-0 on the week, pushing the record to 15-7. Alexandria sits at 15-11. I know they played Piedmont this past week and took 2 of 3 in that series. They sit at 15-11. Jumping up 2 spots this week are the Makos of Orange Beach, sitting at 16-9. They went 2-1 this past week, won a big area series over Bayside Academy, where they split the first 2 games, and then Orange Beach was able to win that deciding game 3.
Did you see how they won game 3?
I did not. No.
Colton Boyd, grand slam.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like a fun series to follow. And Bayside Academy, I know we'll talk about them, but Bayside Academy seems like they're playing well lately too.
And that home run was at Bayside Academy. There's not many balls that leave the yard at Bayside.
Yep. So Orange Beach jumps up to number 7 this week. They sit at 16-9. Deschler also slides up 1 spot this week. They sit at 19-9 after going 3-0 this past week. Jumping up 1 spot as well is Haleyville, who jumps from 6 to 5. They sit at 18-6. They also went a perfect 3-0 on the week and look primed for another strong playoff run this year. And then inside of our top 4, this is the only movement. Etowah and Ops swap places. Ops slides from number 3 to number 4. They went 2-1 on the week. I think they beat their 2 area opponents and then lost to, I want to say, Ayrton. I think it may have been. I think it was Ayrton. So Op comes in at 17-4 at the number 4 spot. Sliding up 1 spot this week is Etowah from number 4 to number 3, going 2-1 on the week. They sit at 17-12, and was that an instance where they won their first 2 games in area?
Yes. No, they lost. They lost on Saturday 8-4 to Oxford.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So Etowah jumps up 1 spot to number 3, and then staying. The top 2 stays the same this week. Bibb County goes 3-1 on the week. I think their one loss was a 1-run loss to Northridge
on Saturday. Yep.
I want to say so. Bibb County stays put at number 2, and then staying at the top spot this week, as they have been for the last few weeks, sitting at 20-2 and going 2-0 on the past week. Oak Grove continues to have a historic season in Class 4A. So they stay at the top spot this week. Looking at some teams outside the top 10, we mentioned Bayside Academy. Bayside Academy sits at 15-12. Central Florence is 17-11. Hanley is 15-10. Pokes Bluff is 17-12, and right in the thick of that tough area we were just talking about. Madison County is 17-4. Munford is 13-6. New Brockton is 11-9. Satsuma is 16-8. Tallahassee is 15-8, and the W.S. Neal rounds us out at 13-5.
Anderson Morgan just gave us a comment, and we thought that was right. We just didn't want to speak too much. Yeah, that's correct. So thanks for the info, Anderson. So that will take us to 5A. In 5A, we have the same 10 teams from last week. And, these teams, these top 10, just continue to win games. And we've talked about 5A and the depth of 5A, and the number of teams we have outside the top 10 in 5A does show the depth in this class. But let's get started. Northside, they do drop from 6 to 10 this week. They went 3-2 last week. I've drawn a blank. Who beat them?
Sipsey Valley.
Sipsey Valley, yes. Sipsey Valley beat them one game in area play. So Northside drops from 6 to 10. They sit at 19-7.
Yeah.
Marbury.
They split the first two games and then won the deciding game 3 and then lost to Gordo.
That's correct. Yeah, that's right. The lost game to Sipsey Valley in area play. At number 9 is Marbury. Marbury is 20-5. They drop a couple spots after going 0-2. They did lose to Elmore County. I believe it was on Saturday. It may not be Saturday, but we'll talk about Elmore County in just a second. Russellville, they dropped from 5 to 8. That is still a really good team. They did go 0-3 last week, and we know the history of Russellville. Like I said, they dropped to 8, and we'll talk about more with Russellville here in just a minute. Elmore County, we just mentioned them. Coach Dismukes has Elmore County rolling. They're at 18-9. They went 3-1 last week. Like I said, they jump up to number 7. At number 6, making a huge jump this week from number 10 to number 6 is Lawrence County. And I believe that one of our scouts is going to see Lawrence County this week. Really, listen here, there is no disrespect towards Russellville. Okay. If there are any Russellville fans listening, listen, this is a compliment to Russellville. We think Russellville is really good. And what a statement that Lawrence County made in area, beating Russellville 3 times. That showed what kind of quality ball club that is. They sit at 19-7. As I said, they went 3-0 against Russellville and make that big jump from 10 to 6. At number 5 is Faith Academy. Faith Academy drops 2 spots from 3 to 5. They went 2-2 on the week. The biggie there was they lost a 2 out of 3 series to St. Paul's. They split the first 2 games. St. Paul's was able to win game 3, which took that series and could that game 3 could play out who is the area champ and area runner-up. We know there are games to be played this week, but Faith Academy drops to 5. Number 4, St. Paul's. They move up from number 8 after that 2 of 3 area series win over Faith Academy. St. Paul's is at 16-8. They went 2-1 on the week. Those are the only 2 games they played. Jumping up a spot, a team that I've seen a couple times, really impressed with them. Madison Academy went 20. They are at 24-6 after going 3-1 last week. They beat James Clemens. They got beat by they got beat by Buckhorn, who's a team on the rise in 6A, and then they beat Hazel Green on Saturday. So I tell you, that Madison Academy team is senior oriented with arms at the top of that rotation, and I don't think there's an easy out in that lineup. So that is a team, and I've said this several times, that's a team that can obviously win it all in 5A. Staying put at number 1 and 2 are Springville and American Christian again. Listen, man, these 2 teams in 5A have been impressive all year long. We talked about a week or 2 ago about American Christian had seemed like they had been on a mini slide, I guess you can say. But we know how good they are. They're at 22-11, and again, hold on to that number 2 spot. And then Springville with a record of 22-4. They went 3-1 last week. and I believe that one loss was a game 3 of an area. I may be wrong there, but the Tigers sit at 22-4. They hold on to that top.
They lost to Lewis County.
Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Then I was wrong there. But Springville, they do hold on to the top spot at number 1 for another week. I know that's at least twice, maybe 3 weeks in a row. Outside the top 10, again, alphabetical, Arab, the Knights are at 16-9. They went 3-0 last week, had some really good individual performances that you will see in the diamond notes. Boaz, man, it's a team that might be slept on a little bit. They're at 19-7. Man, I'm telling you, that's the Pirates have put together, and it's the same thing every year with Coach Keenum. He does a great job there. They're at 19-7. And I feel like I'm saying this about everybody, but I think Briarwood Christian is getting hot now as well.
Let's say.
Yep, they're getting hot. They're at 15-12 right now. They went 3-0 last week. I'm telling you, the 5A playoffs are going to be so interesting to watch. Demopolis, they went 3-0. They sit at 16-9. Alberta had a big area series win over UMS Wright. They took 2 of 3 from them. They sit at 15-7. They went 2-1 last week. There's that UMS Wright win for them. Headland is at 18-7. They also went 3-0 last week. Hopeville is at 14-11. They went 3-1 last week. Leeds is at 19-9 after going 3-1. Lincoln is at 16-11. Shelby County is at 14-12. St. Clair County is at 14-10. UMS Wright, we just talked about them, is at 13-10. And Valley is at 17-6. You know, and you listen to us and we talk about this team went 3-0, this team went 3-1, this team went 4-0. Man, when those teams, there's a lot of winning going on by the teams that we think should be winning. So that's why there's not a big shakeup here, because most of the teams that are in the poll are taking care of business. So it gets harder and harder every week. But that'll wrap us up in 5A.
Yep, and moving on to 6A and kind of piggybacking off of that, like I remember, like we get into these records, you look at Hartsville 21-6, Oxford 22-7. I remember when those teams were 500 after 2 weeks of baseball. So they've played the tough schedule earlier in the season. They've continued to evolve over the middle part of the season and getting ready for gearing up for the playoffs and the last week of area play. But we'll get started here in Class 6A. We have the same 10 teams this week. Just one little shakeup in the polls, but staying put at number 10 this week is Northridge, who goes 3-0 on the week. They sit at 19-7. Hueytown is 21-11. They went 2-1 this past week. Homewood also stays put at number 8 after going 3-1 on the week, pushing their record to 22-6. I guess you could say the one big movement this week, Helena slides down from number 4 to number 7 this week. They got swept by Chelsea in an area series, so they sit at 16-13. I think they are 2-2 on in area, with Chelsea also being 2-2, Spain Park being 3-1, and Pelham being 1-3. So Helena slides down from 4 to 7. Like I said, they sit at 16-13. Hazel Green slides up one spot this week after going 1-1, pushing their record to 25-9. Chelsea also jumps up one spot this week after going 2-0, like we mentioned, sweeping Helena in area play, pushing their record to 17-9. They sit at 2-2 and have, and that's the one thing I think going into this week, you can pretty much control your own destiny for most of these teams in that tough area 7. As does Spain Park, who slides up one spot. Yes, they went 1-2. They split with Pelham in an area series and then got beat by Briarwood Christian. So you're probably asking, why are they sliding up? Well, they sit at 3-1 in the area. So we're rewarding those teams for how they perform in the area, and especially in an area like that. So Spain Park comes in at number 4 this week. And then the top 3 stay the same. Oxford goes 4-0, pushing their record to 22-7. As does Mountain Brook. They push their record to 21-7, coming in at number 2, and then staying at the top spot this week, who seems to be rolling through area play, is the Hartsville Tigers, who go 3-0 on the week and push their record to 21-6. Looking at some teams outside the top 10, Athens sits at 16-7. Buckhorn is 17-11. We go ahead.
We're not sleeping on Buckhorn, I can assure you. I've seen Buckhorn, and I've talked about Buckhorn for the last 2 weeks. We know that Buckhorn is really good, but as we mentioned, it's hard to get teams in when those teams in the top 10 are winning. It's just there's only 10 spots. So I tell you this, we are really looking forward. Oh gosh, there's my weekly text.
Oh yeah. More credibility is gone.
Yeah, we lost our credibility again. Listen, that Buckhorn and Hazel Green series is going to be a really good one because I've seen Hazel Green a couple times. I was going to see Buckhorn today, but unfortunately that game's been moved to Florence. I can't make it over there. Listen here, Buckhorn, we're not sleeping on them. We know they are good. And then the way I saw Josh Henson last week on the mound makes them even better. They are swinging it really well. I'm telling you, it's tough to get to 10, but it's if teams in front of them lose, it makes it a lot easier. But it's hard to get them in.
We're sleeping on Muscle Shoals too. So,
okay, gotcha. Well, you know what? The best thing about it is the results will play their way out.
No doubt.
Yep.
Coleman comes in at 15-11. Gardendale is 16-8. Gulf Shores is 15-11. McGill Toolen is 18-7. Pelham is 14-12. Pell City is 15-9. Saraland is 17-9. Pell City is 15-9. Saraland is 17-9. Southside sits at 20-9. Spanish Fort is 16-11. Stanhope Elmore is 18-12. Wetumpka is 18-10, and both of those teams are getting ready to play to determine the area winner and area runner-up in Class 6A. And Muscle Shoals sits at 14-10. So that's a lot of teams, that's a lot of teams in Class 6A. But that's speaks to how deep the pool of teams is and players in Class 6A. So that'll wrap us up in Class 6A. I'll pass it back to you, and we'll wrap this thing up in Class 7A.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we'll get into 7A. We have the same 10 teams ranked again this week. It's again. You listen to the records that we talk about, and listen to, what all is going into this. Tuscaloosa County, they dropped from 7 to 10. They went 1-2 on the week. They lost 2 out of 3 to Hillcrest Tuscaloosa. Again, that's an area quality opponent. And we've talked about those 2 areas in Birmingham and how it's just, it's high level baseball. And we obviously know that there's some teams that we have right now in 7A that aren't going to make the playoffs simply because only 2 spots from areas. But we've got to let that play out and see how things happen over the next 2 weeks with 7A. But Tuscaloosa County does drop. They do stay in at number 10. Fairhope, they jump up a spot. They went 3-1. They sit at 20-8. I may be wrong, but I think that one loss was a game 3 that did not count against Robertsdale. I'm almost sure of that. Almost sure that they swept Robertsdale and lost game 3 in a game that did not count. Hillcrest Tuscaloosa, they jump up from 9-8. They come in at 20-9. They went 2-1. We already mentioned they had that area series win over Tuscaloosa County. So they come in at number 8. And I'm going to tell you this, this Bob Jones fan may be listening to us, but early in the year, Bob Jones played Hillcrest. And I saw Coach Garner from Hillcrest in a news article about a week ago, talked about how he felt that his players were a little, obviously Bob Jones beat them bad the very first game of the year. And one of the Bob Jones parents came up to me and said, man, I know they won the 6A last year. Did they lose a lot? I said, they lost some. I said, but you watch. When it comes time to it, you watch where Hillcrest Tuscaloosa is. And I went to a Bob Jones game about 2 weeks ago, and that parent said, you were right. I mean, this is typical. And there he is right there. There he is. He listens every week. And I told you, Hillcrest will get it rolling. And look where they are. Just won 2 of 3 from Tuscaloosa County. Coach Garner does a great job there at Hillcrest. There's no doubt about it. Another team that you and I talked about this week, you don't want to see them in the playoffs. Thompson.
Ugh.
Thompson scuffled for a couple weeks there. They're getting it back together. They swept Prattville last week, 23-11. We know those 2 frontline arms, Mikael Holden, Wyatt Williams, among other pieces. You saw Wyatt Williams bump a couple 95s. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
13 strikeouts, 7 innings, 1 hit, 1 run, 1 walk was as advertised.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough, but it's 7A baseball. And listen here, man, you know, we're talking a lot about Thompson, but any of these teams here could beat them. I mean, that's the quality of team in 7A. Hoover, they come in at 21-12. They went 3-1 last week. They won a 2 out of 3 area series against Oak Mountain. So they sit at 21-12. And then the top 5 remain the same. Central, I think they all won every game. I may be wrong.
Vestavia.
Oh, except for, we'll talk about Vestavia in a minute. Central Phoenix City went 4-0. They're at 25-7. Enterprise continues just to roll right along. They're at 3-0 last week. They sit at 22-1. Bob Jones swept Austin in an area series to run their record to 25-8. They stay put at number 3. Vestavia Hills, they went 1-2 last week, but it was a matchup of 1 versus 2 in 7A area. Again, there's those 7A areas that we're talking about. Vestavia beat Hewitt game 1, I think maybe 6-0 or something like that. Game 2, Hewitt Trustful turned around and beat them. And then in that important game 3, which very well could, I don't know. I mean, you've still got Hoover, you've still got Oak Mountain in that area. You don't get any breathers there. Hewitt was able to win game 3 over Vestavia Hills. So if those 2 teams
on a walk-off hit by pitch in the bottom of the 7th.
That's right, a walk-off hit by pitch. So that
game
tells you
2 was 7-5 Hewitt, and then Vestavia won the first one 7-2. So
okay, yeah, I was close with the distance. That's right, but that tells you, you know, the way that game 3 ended. That tells you how close we think Hewitt and Vestavia are. You know, had Vestavia won that game 3, they would have been number 1. I mean, that's just the way it is. But again, it doesn't matter because it's going to be played out on the field. But again, Vestavia is at 20-6. Hewitt Trustful, they're at 25-2. They did go 2-1 last week. We just mentioned that. Their 2 losses are to number 2 Vestavia Hills and National Power IMG. So they stay put at number 1 to the Huskies at 25-2. Teams right outside the top 10. Auburn is at 13-14. Dothan, is it Auburn and Central this week? Is that correct?
Auburn and Central played this past week. Central.
That's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, I knew that. Yep, that's right. Dothan is at 17-9. Grissom is at 19-10. Grissom took 2 of 3 from Sparkman. James Clemens, they're at 20-9. They swept Florence this week. They had to win game 2 in dramatic fashion. I think they scored 6 runs in the bottom of the 7th to win game 2. Oak Mountain, we've talked about them and that just tough area in Birmingham. They went there at 16-12 after, splitting the first 2 games with Hoover. And then Opelika sits outside the top 10. They come in with a record of 18-9 and still control their playoff possibilities moving forward with 2 area series to play.
So that'll wrap us up for the classification polls. I'll go ahead and get us rolling here with the weekly Power 25 poll as I get it pulled up here on our screen. Boy, technology does not want to work. Okay, there it is.
Yeah, gotcha.
So starting off at number 25 this week, we have James Clemens, who makes their way in with a 20-9 record. Grissom comes in at 24, sitting at 19-10. You got Madison Academy at 24-6, sitting at 23. Glenwood sits at 22 with a 21-4 record. Sitting at 21 is Prattville Christian with a 24-2 record. American Christian jumps up one spot to number 20 with a 22-11 record. Homewood stays put at number 19 with a 22-6 record. Springville is number 18 with a 22-4 record. Helena slides down a few spots to number 17 this week. They sit at 16-13. Tuscaloosa County also drops down a few spots this week to number 16 at 22-11 with a couple big playoff series coming up this week. Hazel Green is number 15 at 25-9. Chelsea stays put at number 14 with a 17-9 record in a big series sweep over Helena this past week. Fairhope sits at 13 with a 20-8 record. Hillcrest is number 12. Hillcrest Tuscaloosa is number 12 with a 20-9 record. Spain Park sits at number 11 with a 15-13 record. Thompson slides up a couple spots this week with a sweep over Prattville. They sit at number 10 with a 23-11 record. And then I think the top 9 stays the same from this past week. You've got Hoover at number 9, sitting at 21-12. Oxford at number 8 at 22-7. Mountain Brook at number 7 with the 21-7 record. Hartselle at number 6 with the 21-6 record. Central Phoenix City at number 5 with a 25-7 record. Enterprise at number 4, sitting at 22-1. Bob Jones at number 3, sitting at 25-8. Vestavia Hills at 20-6, sitting at number 2, and then staying at the top spot with a big series win over Vestavia this past week is Hewitt Trustful, who sits at 25-2, and those two losses being the game one to Vestavia Hills, and then the other game being to IMG Academy. I think about a week and a half ago down in Bradenton, Florida. So the Huskies retain their top spot once again as we head into week 7, I believe it is, of the 2025 high school season.
Yeah, well, as always, we appreciate everyone jumping on to listen. Sorry about the technology issues we had earlier, but we got it all figured out. No problem at all. Appreciate you guys hanging in with us. Just a couple things. Don't forget, tomorrow we will be releasing our Mizuno Pitcher of the Week and our Mizuno Player of the Week. On Wednesday, we'll be releasing the Diamond Notes segment for those players that did not win Mizuno Pitcher or Player of the Week. And then stay up to date with where we are out and about throughout the state with our weekly scout blogs that we update as we get out to games. So that's the plan for this week, to get out to as many games as possible. Obviously, the weather may play a factor today. But I also want to remind you that next week we will be having our regular podcast on Monday morning. And to be honest with you, Austin and I haven't even discussed it. I would think that we will probably have a podcast later in the week breaking down all of the 1A through 6A playoff matchups. So we'll probably have 2 podcasts next week. Our one just like this, where we release our polls. It'll be our last 1A through 6A class polls that we release. Then we will, later in the week, we'll get all the brackets figured out. We'll give you who we think is going to win. And we mentioned it previously. We will have that March Madness type bracket that we'll be getting that out next week as well. We'd love for you guys to play. It's a lot of fun to see where you rank. And then the last thing
before you move on, I will say I'm going to go ahead and start. Normally we have a playoff page on our website with trying to lay out all the matchups in these classifications. If your team has already clinched, or if you're an area or runner-up, you don't have to let us know if you've already clinched, but you don't know if you're winner or runner-up. If you've already clinched your area, or if you finish as a runner-up, or when it happens this week, it'd be great if you would inform us. Whether it be DMing us on Twitter or tagging us in a post, it would help me out tremendously. I'm having to, in the past couple of years, having to go and scrub game changers at 2 a.m. all the way to 2 a.m. and pulling records and just kind of making sure that we get the information right, because we try to be the number one resource for people who like us are excited for the playoffs and want to see these matchups. So if your team has already wrapped up your area or finished as a runner-up, or if it happens this week, feel free to let us know, and we'll obviously, we'll double check it and make sure that it's correct. But that would help us out tremendously.
And we've got a pretty good clue on most areas what's at stake, but not every one of them. But it also helps us, as Austin said, it helps us just to know that we're right. Like Westbrook Christian earlier, we thought they had been eliminated. We were not 100% sure. We appreciate the information. But yeah, that would help us significantly. You can shoot us a DM on Twitter if you wish. And then I will wrap us up. I'll wrap us up by just reminding you, for everything relative to high school baseball across the state of Alabama, on our website, prepbaseballreport.com/Alabama, up on that black taskbar at the top, you will see AHSAA. You can click there. You can see the team previews. You can see players of the week, diamond notes, classification polls, everything there, scout blogs, heat sheet, all of that, all the information that we try to get out to and see, that's all housed under the AHSAA tab on our website. So again, for Austin Sharp, our Alabama scouting director, I'm David Sharp, the Deep South supervisor. We appreciate you jumping on with us. Thanks for hanging in there to get us through that, the technology issue we had. But we will hopefully see you at the park this week. If not, we'll see you next Monday. Thanks again. Have a good week. Take care.